Welcome to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden, your host. Glad you could join me. Hey, tell a friend. I think they'll learn something as well. I'm asking the proverbial question: does conformation matter for your dog? And the answer is a resounding yes. But don't take my word for it. I've got the guy who's uniquely qualified to explain why. Jared Deutsch is the director of Conformation for the Versatile Hunting Dog Federation. And he will join me to explain why every aspect of your dog's anatomy is critical to him being a great hunter. He'll perform better, live longer, and stay healthier when all his limbs, organs, and entire body work right. Jared will speak not only from a judge's standpoint in the VHDF, but also as an avid wild bird hunter. In our Fix It segment this week, carrying on the series on shooting better, shooting downhill, the chucker hunter's nemesis, and maybe a few others as well. So if you ever shoot birds that are lower than you, I've got a tip or two that might help you as much as it's helped me. And finally, in our social pages, I asked, did you hunt a new-to-you spot this year? Get your answers, some great photos as well, all coming up right here on the Upland Nation podcast, made possible by Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, TruLock Choke Tubes, Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food, Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, Cable Gangs Tie-Out Systems, Pointer Shotguns.com, and Heartland Lodge. Always good to know what you learn and what you're doing, of course. So if we didn't meet at Pheasant Fest, the social pages are a good place to keep me up to date on what you're doing these days and enjoy every bit of it, by the way. I thought I'd ask the question on our social pages about your season and whether you hunted any birds that were new to you this year. And sure enough, you sure as heck did. Just going to touch on a few of those comments, but enjoyed looking at the photos, enjoyed the whole experience of you folks and what you did. So let's start right at the top. That's a picture of my old guy Buddy back in the day. That was one of our very, very first ruffed grouse hunts. And thank you, everybody at the Ruffed Grouse Society for your hospitality on that one. After that, some great and sometimes inspirational comments. The first one from Cork Green. No new species. Hunted roughies and quail. Only got out a few times, but was grateful every time. Yeah, I know a little bit of the backstory, Cork, so I'm glad to have you back in the field. At Olson's Gun Dogs, they hunted Gamble's quail in Arizona. Whoa, it's still on my list. Best hunt I ever had, they say. I've hunted them, just not in Arizona. Can't wait to go. Got my first sage grouse, says Kevin Biggs, and there's the proof right there. He's showing off a big bomber on some incredible and very classic sage grouse country. Yeah, I remember the days I was pulling into a camping place for a big event. It was actually a Trout Unlimited event, and I'd passed some really good-looking bird hunting territory, but the sagebrush was all low-growing, knee-high and lower. I pulled in, and the guy who was directing traffic for this big camp out with all these people, he said, well, you know where you can go? Go to that spot over there. That's where the sage grouse researchers camp, but they're not here this weekend. I made a mental note of that place. Someday I'll get that tag. Someday. Thanks for the picture, Kevin. Greg Dennis, Kansas Bob White's, it was a blast. And he managed to scratch down a few, all the better. Some great bobwhite hunting somewhere, kind of the south. I think in the southwest is where most of the bobs are down there. I'm usually going for pheasants when I'm out in that country, but have had some fun with bobs as well. Kyle Knight says ptarmigans, prairie chicken, spruce grouse, My, oh my, I'd like to have your frequent flyer miles, Kevin Knight. My dog has only the woodcock left on her lower 48 slam. And why am I not surprised you've already got the dates booked for October of next year? Good luck on that one, Kyle. Beautiful dog. Another wire. How come so many wire hair owners are proud of their dumb question? I know. Beautiful shot there. And wow, ptarmigan. Up there about 14,000 feet, something like that. Dan Jr. Stewart hunted sage grouse, sharp-tailed prairie chicken, scaled quail, and Gambel's quail all new this year. Not only that, show off, we got at least one of every species, 8 total species, all on pointed birds. Well, that sounds like a hell of a lifetime, not just a season. Good on you. Glad to see it, Dan. Chris Lee Hamby. Sage grouse in Wyoming. That's the place to go. Yeah, it was fantastic. I'll definitely be doing that again. Yeah, I got a couple good sage grouse recipes, by the way. The first one is brine them. Do that anyway, no matter what else you do. And then finally, Bruce Wondrak. Hannah added mountain quail to our list. It was a challenging endeavor. Boy, do they run, then fly. But I finally hit one. Well, congratulations, Bruce. And to everybody who shared something. I couldn't get to everybody, but I got a lot of them in there. The photos are great. The stories are great. Boy, right about now is when we need some inspiration like that, isn't it? Whew. Hey, that part of the show is brought to you by, let's see, who is it brought to you by? SageandBreaker.com, gun cleaning and care. Speaking of Gambel's quail country, they're out there in that, closer to more of the Burns quails out there in Sonoyta, Arizona. I will be there someday, I promise everybody. Now it's on the record. The thing I like is the thing they are proud of at Sage and Breaker, and that is these guys are problem solvers. They live the life we live. Lots of dogs, lots of hunting, and they design gear that will help us be better, whether it's cleaning products, travel stuff, or even some sporting clays and trap and skeet shooting accessories. They've got them. Take a look at the entire product line at sageandbreaker.com, and while you're there, sign up for their email list. You will receive first notification of any upcoming sales and all the new products. And if you're eager to have a product that has sold out, very rarely, but it does happen, they'll notify you the minute it's available again. Go to sageandbreaker.com. And I can't tell you enough about this new pointer shotgun. I've been playing with the Field Tech 912 over and under. Yeah, it's a brand new model for them. The fit, the finish, and the overall design are extremely functional and well done. Workmanship is great. You'll see what I mean. Go to the catalog online at pointershotguns.com. Then while you're there, find a nearby dealer, local independent gun store, Cabela's, Bass Pro, Sportsman's Warehouse, Turner's Outdoorsman. Go put one to your shoulder, see what I mean, take a look at the fit, take a look at the finish, and then get one for yourself. It's all available starting at pointershotguns.com. Well, I got to tell you, I believe in the testing systems that most of us use most of the time. There's a group for everybody, but one of the groups I belong to is the North American Versatile Hunting Dog Association. This month's edition of the magazine had an article that just changed my mind about how important conformation is for your dog. Written by a guy who is also the director of conformation for a sister organization called the Versatile Hunting Dog Federation, another group with some pretty hardcore hunters in it. Jared Deutsch joins me from somewhere in Pennsylvania. Jared, welcome to the Upland Nation podcast.
Thanks, Scott. Great to be here.
We talked off mic about what the heck? Why did I become so interested in confirmation after reading your article? I think you finally put it all together for me, and I think I'm not the only one who would read an article like that and then say, "Ah, no wonder." So why don't you just start off with a little bit of a backstory, and then we'll jump into why you wrote the article. But tell us a little bit about yourself and especially the parts that include dogs and birds.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been a VHDF member since 2022. Prior to that, I was a longtime NAVDA member over a decade. Um, Traveled as many different places as I possibly could over the years. Canada, a lot of different places throughout the U.S., chasing wild birds with my dogs, testing through the various systems. Most recently here in the VHDF, I've served as Director of Conformation for the past few years. Proud to be on the national board there representing the membership. And I absolutely just love all things upland and bird hunting, and it's my passion in life.
Tell me about your last season. How did it go?
Yeah, it was a great season. We started off in the prairies out west for a week or so with some great friends, chasing birds out there, and then came back home and we had deer season here and grouse season here. The woodcock migration annually was not too bad. I would say it was middle of the road. Um, and then we moved into waterfowl here in the late part before everything iced up and shut us down. But it was another great season. My 3-year-old dog is going strong, and he's really bringing my passion forward this year for sure.
It's funny you bring it up like that, but that's for many of us, the dogs brought us into hunting or keep us in hunting. What was the case for you? Did you get the dog first and then become a hunter, or what?
I think it was kind of all at the same time. So my story is a little unique. My grandfather was a big hunter here in rural Pennsylvania. He had Cocker Spaniels, and my dad actually doesn't hunt. He's a big fisherman. So my mom was the first one to take me out. She showed me how to field dress a deer. She had Cocker Spaniels. Um, but a cool backstory there. So it all was kind of always an interest. Um, and then when I finally got out of college, I had enough of my own go of everything to get my first dog, and it kind of went from there.
That is a unique story. You're lucky you had a parent and then
Mm.
other people involved, which is more than some can admit to. I'm glad it worked for you. What was the highlight of this season for you? Was it out west somewhere, or was it in your familiar grouse woods?
Uh, I think it's probably a tie. Out west, there's two stark moments I can remember. Out west, my 3-year-old had a covey of Huns just absolutely pin solid, and it was a nice big covey in a year where we were walking miles between coveys. That was just the story of this year, where we were, and it was just really beautiful dog work and a beautiful surrounding. Um, there's one day though here in Pennsylvania, if you've ever hunted rough grouse in Pennsylvania, it is not for the faint of heart. It is a very challenging task. But we do have pockets of birds left in some of the areas here, and we were able to get a 2 bird limit of rough grouse in Pennsylvania pointed over my 3-year-old wire hair. That was a very special day. And speaking of conformation and structure, I believe on that day he clocked 23 miles on his Garmin. So it was kind of hand in hand with the article, an interesting topic there as well.
Yeah, in the grouse woods, 23 miles is a lot of
Hmm.
damn running, isn't it?
Yeah. For me trying to keep up with them too.
Just because I'm a selfish SOB, I want to ask you about. I got to do one serious Hun hunt, and it was the last day of my season,
Hmm.
last day of the season. Now that I think about it, but what I was struck by how you mentioned walking a long way for Huns. Um, we did plenty of that, of course, but some of them were in the oddest
Hmm.
locations. Yeah, do you have enough experience to decide whether that was true for you?
Yeah, in the area where we normally go out west, I would say we kind of ran into that. Some of our familiar haunts this year were either birdless or really, really small numbers, pretty sparse coveys. And then some of the other areas where I normally go, it was kind of like we'd run into them and be like, well, that was interesting. Um, So I do think it was a very, very dry year where we go on the prairies. You could see it in the environment. Um, it looked like a polar opposite as to where I was the year prior on the same ground. So there has to be something there.
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the head. I think whatever water, whatever bird species need simply was not there,
Hmm.
for a number of reasons. All the birds I shot that day were, full of their crops were full of grass, nothing else, just grass. Um, and I'm not sure if that's normal for the end of the season for Hungarian partridge or not, but it was definitely different.
Yeah. I had a sharp-tail crop this year packed with caterpillars, and that was a rare event for me. I was kind of surprised.
Yeah, because, well, we could go on all day about
Yep.
that, and someday maybe we will. But I wanna get back to the article and why it changed
Mhm.
my view of confirmation, and that is you really made the connection between dog performance, health, longevity, all of the things that are important to us as dog owners, and conformation. If you're a mule skinner or you're a horse trader, maybe even a cattleman, you look at this stuff all day, every day. We don't think about it quite the same way. What was the impetus behind you finally saying, "I'm going to get this off my chest and help everybody"?
Yeah. So in my role here, it's been a great, great program. It's super successful so far. We've been doing a lot of really great work, and I just feel as though, I mean, here we are talking about this in 2026. I mean, some of the references that are
Yeah,
in that article, right? One of them's from what, 1950 something, McDowell's
yeah,
publication.
yeah.
Um, I feel like with this specific audience, it just hasn't quite gotten the shake it really deserved up till now. So that was a big part of it. And I think up until now, the mindset in the hunting community and in other, like, frankly, working dogs, right? If you really broaden your
Sure.
perspective, is
Yeah.
you got hunting lines or field lines and you have show lines, right? So why isn't the mindset, hey, if I'm breeding a great show line or I want to get a puppy from a great hunting line, why isn't it one and the same? Why isn't a great hunting line? Why isn't that dog going to have the structure that's going to set it up for the best possible performance? To me, it comes full circle right back around.
And originally, of course, dog shows,
Hmm.
if you want to call it that, were envisioned to do exactly that.
Hmm.
And I don't want to go down that path. We can
Yep.
complain all we want about Westminster, but in our world, we should recognize perhaps the value of good confirmation. Yeah, take that word conformation and not confirmation, on your knees in Catholic Church. Conformation. I had to get that in because I was almost accidentally confirmed, but that's but confirmation. Explain in broad terms what that truly means for a dog.
Yeah, absolutely. So to me, it is important that we represent both, right? That's why it's called confirmation and structure evaluation. So there's an interesting part there. But first and foremost, confirmation, if I was going to define it simply, would be adherence to a standard. So adherence to a defined standard of what we believe is the image of this breed.
You talk about the old days, in your article about, there was a time when, we relied on our hunting dogs to
Mhm.
basically help feed the tribe, and that means they were going out all the time, frequently, daily, certain times a year, and that is one of the reasons we are so adamant about confirmation now. But what about a dog that is, hunting 20 days a year?
Mhm.
Why is it so critical for them?
Yeah, yeah. To me, it's even a bigger, point of fact because now you have this individual who's bought this puppy, right? He's trained it all summer, likely done all this work. He's probably saved up, some pennies, some PTO for this trip that he's going to take this dog on. And now the first day they get out there and they got a blown pad or they have something that now the whole thing is a kibosh, right? For the average person who owns a dog. And to me, if that was any of us, frankly, it's something that we should be looking at before it ever even happens. But I think it's the exact opposite. I think we really don't realize it until we get out there in the mud and we realize what happens.
You know, where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Um, let's go through, let's start at the nose and go to the tail tip and hit on some of the important aspects of a dog's conformation. And I'm going to cheat a little bit here because I think it's so important to cover all of these. The
Hmm.
head and the neck, I thought, I looked at that and I thought, what the heck does the neck have to do with anything? But start at the nose tip and go from there because, and we're not going to hit all the details. In fact, anybody who wants to really needs to join NAVDA, get that magazine and study it carefully. But here are the highlights. Nose and head,
Yeah,
go.
sure. So, and you can really take up as much time as you want on some of this stuff with the level of details, but I'll
Yeah.
do the best I can here. That's another big point. So nose, right? We're talking about versatile hunting dogs, right? So the first thing that we're going to be looking for is pigmentation according to the standard. Some of that's going to be based on the color of the dog and the breed of the dog, right? So any nose that's lacking pigmentation, right, is the dog's no longer protected from UV rays wherever he's hunting, but also that's the toughness of the texture, in one way of phrasing it. Well ventilated open nostrils. You can actually get what are called stenotic nares or pinched nostrils, and the shape, the size, and the orientation of the nose as it pertains to the muzzle and the jaw, all of that's going to allow for ventilation, scenting, everything that that dog needs to do while it's operating in the foremost capacity.
Go on beyond the nose to the ears, the neck,
Mhm.
that area, because that this is one that you've got so many observations there. Enlighten us to a couple things there.
Yeah, so as we continue across the dog, right, we have the rest of the head, so we have eyes. And to me, or to some people, it's very, very simple, and it really it is, right? It's visual acuity, it's a predator, but shape and placement are what's most important to me, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
if we're hunting out in the field, whether it's grouse woods, prairies, working in water, that's where the neck's going to come in even bigger. Um, the eyes are going to have to avoid injury through all of that. They're not going to want to collect debris. They're not going to want to get punctures. It's astounding to me the number of miles that I spend in the woods in very, very thick cover, aspen cuts, greenbrier. Never once does the dog get a cut in its eye or something serious, or if it is, it's fairly rare. Now imagine if you change the shape of the eye and the position on the head, how often it would happen, right? And it's only that simple and that close to the danger zone, right? If we think about it from a physiological perspective.
The
Ears, go ahead.
go after you
Ear,
because this is
ears.
actually a sore spot for me, but pardon the pun.
Yeah, yeah.
Ears.
Yeah, yeah. So shape and lay of ears. There's a aspect of breed. When you look at the head on the whole, there's an aspect of breed type. That's the image of the dog. So that's part of the conformation side, right? But ears are also going to help with scenting and how they lay, right? When we think about some breeds of dogs and what they're actually doing while the dog's head's moving along the ground. But also the position, the fact that they can move independently, and the lay of the ears is helping with all those other predatory aspects. Um, but yeah, it's also a point where if that ear isn't structured correctly, they love to bleed like crazy if they get cut on something or yeah, they're highly vascularized area of the dog for sure.
I am I'm learning something already, but it's too late for me and Flick, but maybe on the next pup. But
Mm,
motion, a dog moving well, it starts with the front end. As you put it in
mm,
the article, the dog really drives with his back wheels. But
mhm,
let's take the front end because there's everything from the elbows to the shoulders to the pads,
mhm,
everything in there that we need to, it's puppy season. We're all
mhm,
thinking about it. Some of us are actually going to get permission from somebody else and get one. Uh,
mhm.
what are the things we should look for and why in that front end of the dog?
Absolutely. So front assembly, um, interestingly, when you read across a lot of the standards, you're going to find a similar formula in the versatile game. Um, I would say the vast majority, pushing over 90%, are going to call for pronounced withers. So, height and muscle at the top, right above the shoulders. That's specific to, the muscle attachment at that point and what that's going to do for the dog in terms of reach, and the strength of the muscle there. Then you're going to look at shoulder layback. That is a common area that always comes up. So the shoulder layback ultimately is the angulation of the shoulder blade in perspective to the upper arm, right? So, and then you have the upper arm itself that is then forming an angle with the lower arm and leading down to the pastor and the feet and the rest of the front assembly. So ultimately, the straighter that whole front end is, the less reach the dog is going to have, the less shock absorbency the dog is going to have in the front. And the opposite is true. A dog with a layback 40 degrees pushing more is going to have way more reach, way more fluid motion in the front. It's going to be a more efficient mover. It's going to be more balanced. And just like a suspension on a vehicle, those angles are there to provide that shock absorbency and reduce wear. As we move down towards the feet, you get to the pastern, you're going to call for a slightly sloping pastern. Same concept there is true. It wants a little bit of angulation at the pastern so that you have that shock absorbency, that durability, while that pastern is literally hitting, especially on uneven terrain, over and over and over again. Then you get to the feet. And as a Western hunter, worth its weight in gold, a good set of feet. So you have the size, shape of the overall foot itself, how strongly it stands upright, and then the size of the pads, the thickness of the pads, and the pigmentation of the pads, giving it its overall toughness.
You mentioned thickness, and I'm actually finally going to get that one off my chest in a magazine article in a few months.
Mm.
But for now, um, th- the rubber truly meets the road when your dog's feet hit the ground. And one of the things that I've always been told by old school trainers is um, smaller feet are better for a hunting dog. You contend that
Mhm.
larger feet have a strategic advantage. Explain a little bit of that.
Yeah, to me, it comes back to physics and engineering, and some of what Hastings literature stated, right, is most breeds are going to be better off with a larger foot because they're going to have larger, more robust pads. The whole system is going to be stronger. Sure, I'm sure there's a bell curve there where too much size is going to, diminish some agility, or something along those lines. But I do think that proportionately, the balance lies with a slightly longer foot, larger foot.
Larger foot.
Hmm.
Um, does now let's put ourselves in a puppy buyer's mode. How many of these things can we determine with some relative level of surety on an 8-week-old dog? How do we look at those things in a way that starts to make sense? If we don't have your background and your experience, what can we do?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple interesting points there. Number one, I believe one of the articles I referenced, or sorry, the book I referenced, Pat Hastings, at one time she and her husband were doing several hundred litters a year that were all 8-week-old puppies, like right on the nose. So that timeline is critical. However, there's obvious limitations when you're trying to do conformation and structure evaluations on puppies, right? Um, but I always say one of the best things is to look at the data. I'm a professional scientist, so that's, an easy thing for me to throw out there because my eyes typically go do it anyway. But we have these testing systems in place that are, very helpful. Something like the Versatile Hunting Dog Federation, for example, we have an online database. Every dog that goes through a conformation and structure evaluation gets stored in there. It's 100% public. It's 100% free. Anyone can access it. So all of these things that we're talking about in this article, head, neck, back, front assembly, rear assembly, movement, the dog in that case is scored with a 10-point system, and all that data on all the parents, the pedigrees that are entered is now available to anyone who's looking to utilize it for breeding, puppy purpose, purchasing, or just general information.
So if I'm summing you up correctly, check me on this. Uh, the best source of data for the potentiality of a very young dog
Mhm.
is much in the same way everything else is. It's in the parentage.
Yeah, obviously, yeah, yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah. Um, Talk a little bit more about feet. Again, pardon the pun, sore spot for us. but I won't bore you with the details. What
Mhm.
what are the things that we have to worry about with the actual paw itself?
Yeah, the dreaded pad tear, the blown pad. I've that one comes up every season. I know at least a couple people that I get a call from every year that we got blown pads on day one, day two. But you can also, right, have cactus, thorns, any number of things that can go in there, break off, that cause all kinds of issues down the road, even if you don't realize it right away. And then of course, rubbing, wearing down. A lot of times in the grouse woods, you'll see around the nails will get raw, or especially right between that first knuckle and the foot, and basically the backside of the pastern. Those areas just love to get rubbed raw on a dog, and part of that to me is the dog's coat, and coverage in that area, but also the angle of the pastern as it meets the ground while it's working in those conditions.
And if you don't own horses or you're not as deep into dog conformation as Jared is, the pastern, describe the location of the
Mhm.
pastern for us, Jared.
Yeah, the pastern would be referred to as the anatomical location between the lowest joint and the foot. So think of that space that's right, right above the foot where it meets the ground, and that last joint of the dog's foot.
Yeah, and it is, if you look closely at your dog after a hard day, or generally a couple days after a hard hunt, that's where the scabs are gonna be.
Hmm. Yeah,
Well, keep working.
because some
We're
of the sorry, Scott.
after you.
Some of the slow motion videos that have been taken of dogs, especially on uneven terrain or where the front assembly is actually climbing a hill, that pastern is actually almost meeting the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's basically bending and forming an angle to meet the ground.
Yeah, which scares me. I just think about that and cringe. The only broken, toe I've ever had in a dog around here is from basically almost a situation like that. Um, let's keep moving, back through the dog. We will start on, kind of the middle, the the point between the front and the back legs, and then we'll have a break right after that. But what is there on the dog's midsection that we need
Yeah.
to be mindful of when it comes to conformation as regards performance?
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. I think I'll break that one into two parts. So the back and then the chest, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um, So the back and the top line, I always refer to the top line as a great barometer. Um, Not necessarily in terms of, beauty or appearance, and even its own structure is in the vertebrae, because you could have a weak union at the spine where you have some of the vertebrae bulging or they just look uneven. But the top line in general gives you a barometer on what is going on in the overall system and the overall structure of the dog. For example, if you see a really steep front to back top line, then you know that the dog is either likely very much taller at the front than it is at the rear, or there's some other aspect that is out of balance that is creating that. And the opposite could be said if the dog is higher at the rear than at the front, and vice versa. You could have a roach in the top line or softness in the top line, all of which are indicative of some other larger issue that's going on in terms of the structural system. So that's just top line um, in the back. And then you have muscles on either side that go down. So what our judges will typically do is feel all the way down the back, feeling for the musculature around the vertebrae. And then you're going to get to the loin. So the loin is basically that space right in front of the rear assembly before the rib cage, right? So there's not a lot of other skeletal structure there, with the exception of the vertebrae. So we always are feeling for the musculature and the strength there. Most of your standards are going to call for a very well developed, strong loin because it's almost hanging out there in no man's land. And then the length of the loin is going to be important as well as the rest of the back. A lot of these standards are calling for dogs that are almost square or square. So, in other words, when we take our initial
like
dimensions, yep, Yeah, like if you were,
Look at from the side.
exactly. Yep. So
Yeah.
if you were to take measurements like we do in our evaluations, where we evaluate the length of the dog, the overall length of the dog, or the dog's body, I should say, and then the height of the dog's body at the withers in the front, essentially a lot of the standards are going to be calling for a dog that is almost the same in those proportions, or just a little bit longer than it is tall. And there's a very important reason for that. So that loin, if you get a much longer loin, if the rib cage is really long, you now have a dog that is way longer than it is tall. And you could have the opposite thing hold true, where the dog is, its dimensions are way too tall versus um, its overall length. Now you have a different issue. And when we get into movement, we'll probably talk about some of that. But um, all of those aspects create to the balance of the dimension of the dog. And when I think back in loin, I'm thinking muscle and I'm thinking dimensions and indicators of those. So then
Good.
chest.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, that's I was going to go the same place.
So chest, you have you have the size of the chest, obviously. And when we think chest, right, what's in the chest? Heart, lungs, everything cardiovascular, engine wise. I try to use some of those analogies. That is all coming from the chest, right? So the depth of chest, the spring of the ribs, how much fill is there. Um, Essentially, what you're going to see in a lot of the standards and the structural principles is a depth of chest that is about down to the elbow. Of course, that reference point is only useful if the elbow is in the right place to begin with, right? So I would say half the overall, height of the dog at the front in most standards would be a good reference point. Typically, we'll look at the chest from the side, the front, and then feel all the way around to see how the fill is. But that's your metabolic, or not, sorry, cardiovascular driver for everything, lung efficiency, all of that.
I just got to put a parenthetical remark in here because I learned it the hard way my first NABDA puppy test. Folks, if you're going to do some kind of testing in most clubs, most organizations, other people are going to put their hands all over your dog. And don't wait until test day to acquaint your dog with testicle counting.
Yeah.
Just another boring well, it wasn't boring at the time, but it is now. I've learned a lot about that. But this is the Upland Nation podcast, everybody. I'm Scott Linden. That is Jared Deutsch with the Versatile Hunting Dog Federation. He's their director of Conformation. Jared, you just get a moment there to pour another coffee while I take a quick break, and we'll be back with the second half where we talk the rest of the dog, the practical applications, and then also my Fix It segment, which is all about shooting downhill. And maybe you had to do some of that, Jared, on your Hungarian partridge hunts. We'll cover that after a quick break. The Upland Nation podcast is brought to you in part by Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food, designed for active, hard-working dogs. You know the kind, probably sitting right next to you now. Yeah, every sporting dog deserves the best advantages, and nutrition is one way to ensure peak performance, especially when it comes to recovery after the hunt. One of the ways to do that is provide the right ingredients in the right proportions, and that's what Pro Plan Sport Dog Food is all about. Concentrating the nutrition to optimize oxygen metabolism that increases endurance during exercise. The high-protein formula with real meat as a first ingredient also provides the amino acids that nourish your dog's muscles and help them recover after a hunt. Learn more about the science behind the nutrition. Go to ProPlansport.com. And learn more about how to become a better shooter. Go to TrueLockChokes.com and figure out what kind of chokes you have in your gun now and what kind of advantages you might have if you replace them with the highest quality aftermarket chokes on the market. Yeah, Trulock chokes are made with the tightest tolerances in the industry on state-of-the-art CNC equipment. It's never been easier to order better chokes. Just go to the website, look for some of the tools that Scott Trulock has on their pages, from a choke identification tool to figuring out what chokes you actually have in your gun right now and what constrictions they are. It's all right there at TrulockChokes.com. Welcome back to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden. On the other screen is Jared Deutsch, the Director of Conformation for the Versatile Hunting Dog Federation. Jared, by the way, that's a good-looking dog in the picture you sent me. Tell me more about your 3-year-old.
Sure, sure, yeah. So that's Hopper. Um, that's his name. Yeah.
I
So
love it.
he's
Yeah.
we were both big fans of Stranger Things, the show on Netflix with Chief Hopper, and the name also kind of fit in like one of those quirky puppy ways when he was young. So it just stuck. Um, but yeah, he's a great little dog. He's not so little anymore. I think he was a year old in the picture I gave you, but he's been all over now, and we've been having just a blast together. So
You said 11 states.
yeah,
What were some of
yeah.
your favorites?
Oh geez. Well, I like them all for different reasons. I just
Yeah.
like, again, like given my background and kind of what I do, I just like, solving new puzzles, in biology, kind of chasing new species, getting out there and exploring too. But I always go back to Montana. I really like the Michigan UP. But I'm always looking for a new challenge too.
I asked on our social pages a while back and talked about it earlier on this podcast. Uh, to you, Jared Deutsch, did you pursue any new to you species this year?
Mm. No, actually, no. Yeah, this was a repeat season, so we hit um, some of our favorite relocations. Not necessarily the exact same properties or anything like that, but it was a year of some of the repeat states for us this year. Yeah.
Yeah, it turned out much the same for me. I was in the same area code, but I
Hmm.
was hunting stuff that I hadn't hunted before. And
Yeah.
you know how it goes. I'd say 80% of the time it was a good idea.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, let's get back to conformation and versatile hunting dogs and the reason for it. We're now we've cut the dog in half. We're going to the back end now, where all the important stuff happens when we're out there on a hunt. He's using his back legs way more than his front legs, but all the other things that take place back there are important to somebody who's looking for a dog that can go day after season after season.
Mhm.
Um, Go back from the loins towards the tail tip, and let's just parse that out.
Sure. Yeah. So once you get rearward from the loin, you're going to have the croup and the tail. So the croup is essentially the space on the top of the dog leading up to the tail. And what's interesting, our eval form, our conformation and structure eval form actually will call out croup to be weighted and score in both the back and the rear assembly. Because if you think about it, it's a transition point, right? It's starting up there around the back and then it's really moving back into the tail and it's ultimately part of the rear assembly. So I always say if you're one of those people who loves those tail sets out in the field, you should be looking at the structure of the croup because it is telling you something. I mean, I've judged dogs in the field as well as conformation where I mean I've seen a dog who was super intense on point, and he just honestly he was trying everything he could, and he didn't even have the ability to lift his tail. And then I
Oh, the
turned to
poor
one of the
guy.
other judges and I said, "Well, look at the croup. I mean, he physically can't." Um, so it's an interesting thing when we think about how all of this kind of comes together in the performance package as well, but the link is there.
You know,
Um,
yeah, you cited a great book, which I'm going to go get at some point, but this stuff has been examined, analyzed, taken apart piece by piece for centuries, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the interesting part to me is and why I kind of wanted to get this article out. Um, I represent our membership at the Federation, but frankly, I think everybody with a dog, even if it's not a hunting dog, will benefit from knowing some of this stuff. And here it is, it's 2026. We're now just talking about some of this. The literature's been out for decades or hundreds of years. Um, and I think that it's gaining a lot of really good momentum. And I think ultimately the future of the breeds is what's going to benefit. That to me is the important part, right?
Well, I agree, and that's, of course, the reason for so many of our organizations, and, you gotta give give them credit, even back in the day, the American Kennel Club
Hmm.
was all about the exact same thing, trying to ensure that you breed the best to the best to get even better, and, it's still true in many cases in many organizations, and more power to you guys, you volunteers who are, carrying the flag in that regard. I don't wanna be a fanboy, but maybe once we hunt, I will be. But, appreciate all your hard work, especially when you're out there, judging dogs from far away. You're far away. Um, let's take a look at the back legs because to
Hmm.
me, number one, I look at those as just an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah.
And you look at them as the primary means of propulsion. And I think that's why they're an accident waiting to happen. But talk to me about conformation in the back legs.
Absolutely, and well said. Yeah. So dogs are rear wheel drive, right? So all of that, you use the right word, propulsion, drive to go forward. That is all coming from the rear assembly in its collective power. So you have the upper and lower thigh. Obviously, you're looking for something heavily muscled, appropriate bone size all the way down. And then you have the hocks, right? So the hocks are, if we think about pastern again, now in the rear, you have that space between the foot and that top joint in the rear. That's called the hock, right? And that to me is the most important piece of the entire rear assembly, because that is basically a foundation point. So the dog is using all of its muscle in its rear legs and it is driving down, right? That's essentially what's happening. The muscles are contracting and it's exploding and the dog's going to launch forward. So all of that force is basically being directed on the hocks, and the hocks are sitting there and they're taking the brunt of all of that. So they're meant to set entirely perpendicular to the ground. They're meant to be as short as possible and as strong as possible. So most of your standards and your structural principles are going to call for a hawk that is as well let down. That's the phrase they use, well let down as possible. And all that really means is that it's a short pastern, right? It's as close to the ground as possible.
You know,
So
you
simple physics. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead because I think you're gonna answer the question.
Simple physics, right? Something that's longer, right, is easier to bend, break, etc. Um, so a hawk that is more well let down, shorter pastern is going to be much more strong in its position.
Okay, so I gotta admit, I watched, Best in Show again a few nights back, and if you haven't seen it, everybody, it's worth one viewing, just one. But, anybody can stack a dog, get him to look like, a show dog with the right, incentive, encouragement, and art direction. How do we actually evaluate a dog in a correct stack so that we can particularly see that hawk going perpendicular? I mean, it doesn't strike me as a natural stance, but maybe it is in a well-conformed dog.
Yeah, yeah. So stacking is part of it. We always, in the VHDF CSE, we evaluate dogs front and rear in a stack position, and then we get into movement. So obviously this is not a dog show type of eval. This is a hunting based, working based eval. So we do not ask people to bring dogs with so much polish and practice that they just stack perfectly. In fact, our judges help people stack dogs if necessary. We'll help place feet, do whatever we need to do. These dogs are not in the ring all year or anything like that. This is a working dog, gun dog eval. Um, but yeah, knowing how to stack a dog for evaluation is helpful just so you can get a clear picture. Typically, you obviously want the dogs somewhere where you can work with it. You can have the feet placed correctly. When we're talking rear assembly and the hocks, The reference point or the line of reference is the tip of the toes essentially aligning to the point of buttocks. So if you were to draw a vertical line from the point of buttocks or the end of the dog just past where its rear ends, the tip of the toes would fall right in line with that. So from there, if you put the feet there in that orientation
Okay.
and you see
Yeah.
something else, then you know there's more going on that's going to go into your eval.
Got it.
Mhm.
Um,
And to your point, Scott, you could attempt, and it's a strong point when you compare an evaluation like the one in the Federation against a show ring. You could attempt in a show ring, right, to make a dog look good. You could, people who are really experienced handlers do it all the time. They put feet in certain places. They know the dog that they're handling so that they can ultimately try to influence the outcome. I would argue that a well-trained, experienced judge like ours, right, regardless of how you position the feed or do whatever you want to do, you're ultimately impacting something else, right? So, for example, if we say the dog is over angulated at the rear, and we know that, but the handler decides to position the feet a lot further forward to try to diminish that, what are they going to do, right? They're probably going to add a height at the rear, and we're now going to see it in the top line. So you could try to do whatever you want, but in some way, shape, or form, the anatomical structure is what it is, and it's going to show up.
Hey, everybody. Jared is like your fourth grade teacher. Even when they're writing on the chalkboard, they know what you're doing back there and they're going to catch you at it, aren't they? It's funny how one thing leads to the other, but we get it. It really is one long chain, and every link has to come into the right spot at the right time.
Exactly.
Let's get to my favorite location, and that is under the tail and that general area. I related a bit of our first testicle counting, but there are a lot of other things that happen back there. And one that struck me as I'd never thought of, which is probably everybody else too, the shape of what you see
Mm.
back there, period. So explain what happens when we're looking at that back end.
Yeah, yeah. So the back end of the dog from the rear, I believe, is what you're referring to, the overall shape. When you look at the overall shape, you know, from top to bottom, up at the top, you can actually see a, you know, what's typically referred to as an upside down U. And I believe what Hastings was referring to there when she wrote about the upside down view U versus the upside down V was essentially tight rears and really straight rears, right? So if you have a tight, really straight rear and you have that upside down V, right, you could essentially be looking at things that are going to be of concern for breeding or whelping or anything of that nature. Um, but also it's just telling you something about the rear assembly, right?
Yeah.
Because everything is really, really close and tight and straight up and down. Which, when we go back to the principles of angulation, shock absorbency, having enough space and muscle to do what it's meant to do, it's going to be lacking.
That's almost a geometry problem,
Hmm.
it sounds like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So, the big question, and people are probably asking it about now if they didn't ask it at the very beginning, is uh, what's the worst case scenarios? What happens when things go wrong in a conformation in a dog and we're in the woods or we're in the field? What are the things that are problematic?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's the take home at the end of the day, right? And I think the ultimate word, if you had to assign one, would be health span. So yeah, we want the high performers. We want the conformation and structure because ultimately it's going to give us the max ability, right? It's going to give us durability. It's going to give us farther reach, farther everything, like you would see in a professional athlete. But at the end of the day, we all love our dogs, and I think we want them to have the longest life possible. We want them to share. We want to share as many seasons as we can with them, right? That's the end goal. I have two dogs, one who's conformationally very well off, and the other who's not. And it's not a surprise that the one who's not had to retire early, and a good portion of his life. And I think it's a driver for me too, but a good portion of his life was cut short with everything he loved to do, and you can definitely see it. So I think we kind of have an obligation there, because we all, you know, love our dogs. We want the best for them. So that to me is a big part of it. Um, anytime you get injuries, right? I always say, yeah, you can have the fluke random thing happen, the dog got hurt, whatever the case may be. He decided to run into a barbed wire fence or something like that because he's, going after a retrieve. But all of those, when we talk about the CLs, cruciate ligament, we talk about things up front, we talk about feet, we talk about any of those other types of injuries that are so common, really expensive surgeries. Um, to me, um, conformation and structure can mitigate a lot of that and absolutely help the future for the dogs that love to do what we love to do.
So we can be selfish because we all want to hunt a lot, but
Hmm.
we can also be caring because we want our dog to be able to hunt a lot without pain and for as long as possible. I've never heard it put so bluntly and so clearly as you just did, Jared Deutsch. Jared, tell us just a bit about VHDF so that if anybody is more interested in this aspect of developing hunting dogs, they might want to, learn more about your organization.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Versatile Hunting Dog Federation can be reached online at our national website. We have multiple forms of evaluation, including the conformation and structural evaluation that we spoke about here. We have three essential field type tests, a puppy level test, an intermediate level test. Those are both referred to as aptitude tests in our organization. And we have a performance evaluation, which is like a top tier type of eval that incorporates, a full 1 hour brace in the field, a really long drag, three back to back to back water tasks.
Oh,
Uh,
God.
yeah, for those looking for the ultimate challenge. But in my eyes, the VHDF is, I think, comprehensive. It utilizes a 10-point scoring system, which gives it a lot of granularity. It has everything from puppy up to finished performer at the top level with the ultimate challenge. And now it offers conformation and structure. So you can have a CSE evaluation in any affiliate club anywhere in the US once it's established, and you would essentially then get the entire dog with full dimensions, coat, movement, head, back, front assembly, rear assembly, all evaluated 0 to 10, available on our online database with printable certificates, all 100% free and accessible.
It's a great organization founded and run by
Hmm.
people like us. You've heard several times my talking with Jeff Funke, who is one of the original fathers of VHDF. It is something everybody ought to look into. You don't have to always take the tests to be a member, and you will learn something if you simply show up and watch. Take my word for it. In fact, I may be going to that May test over in Idaho. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. Jared Deutsch, if you had to leave us with one more bit of advice about the criticality of conformation in hunting dogs, sum it up for us.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat here, but it's because we love the dogs, right? We want what's best for the dogs. We love the dog. That's why we all do this. That's why we're on the podcast. Um, all these organizations are nonprofit. It's what we love to do. We want to see it get better. I think up until now, there's always been this firm, kind of rigid line between field, performance, conformation. And if we kind of reframe it and honestly take a fresh perspective on it, what's best for the dogs is that we look at all of these things and we put it into a collective package as we move forward.
Well, there you have it. It's all about the dogs once again. But isn't that the truth? Jared Deutsch, Director of Conformation for the Versatile Hunting Dog Federation. Almost, almost blew it. But VHDF is where you learn more about all of that. What is the website address? I don't have it right in front of me.
Yeah, I believe that's at versatileHuntingDogFederation.org.
There you go. Just Google Versatile Hunting Dog
Hmm.
Federation, and you'll get there in a click or two. Hey, learned a lot. Thanks a lot for joining us here on the Upland Nation podcast. Once again, Jared Deutsch. Have a great off season, and maybe I'll see you in Idaho. Take care now.
Thanks, Scott. Looking forward to it.
And the rest of you, stick around. I'm going to help you. Well, at least I've helped myself. And if it worked for me, it'll probably work for you. If you're desperate and all else has failed, I'm going to help you shoot downhill just a little bit better, I hope. After this word from Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, those guys can help you if you're in Western Oregon. Take a lesson from those guys. MidValleyClays.com is where you start that process. And if you're in the market for a Browning shotgun, these guys have got a line direct to the factory. And all their friends in the business who might have that hard-to-find gun you really covet. Subgauge, different configurations, special wood, whatever it is, my friend Dave Fiedler at MidValleyClays.com can probably find it if anything is out there in your world. That's right. Take a look at MidValleyClays.com. Learn more about their gun room and what they have in stock. Call Dave. Tell him what you're looking for and why you're looking for that. And he'll probably be able to find it better than anybody else out there. I have. You might. MidValleyClays.com. Well, you know my problems with shooting. I don't have time to list them all. But one of my biggest challenges in chucker country in particular, but we all run into it somewhere. Jared's talking about some of the Hungarian partridge shots. I remember a couple downhill shots against the wind, luckily. But if you're shooting downhill at birds for whatever reason, there are a few things you might try if nothing else has worked. If you have the luxury of time and a steady dog and birds that haven't been harassed too much, the first thing I'd suggest is try and sneak downhill as far as you can. You got a dog up here pointing downhill, get down below him, and if you can, figure out where the birds are, get down below them. Simple solution, because then it's either just a straight going away or it might even appear to be a rising shot. That makes my life a lot easier and probably yours as well. One other way to do that is for you to alternate with your partner. If you're both walking across a slope, the high guy gets some of the shots, the low guy gets the shots he doesn't get, and you're always low. Chucker hunter's mantra. If you're stuck shooting down slope no matter what, maybe it's just at the sporting clays range for that matter, you can do a couple basic things. Again, if nothing else has worked for you, your ready position, that is, the point you're holding your shotgun before you put it to your shoulder, adjust it so that the muzzle is a little bit lower, anticipating the trajectory of the birds. You're not going to always get it right, but you're going to get it right more than if you just leave it pointing up into the air like you do when you're shooting a towering pheasant. Number two, when the birds fly and you're getting ready to shoot, when you are mounting the gun, lean forward. I saw one quote from a great instructor a while back. He says, bow to the target. That forces everything to start a little bit lower because that's where the birds are. Well, if nothing else has worked for you, you might practice those at the range sometime. There's all sorts of target presentations where you can do that. And then when it comes chucker season or hun season, or maybe even some of those quail in the hills in Arizona, you'll be a little bit more ready. Hope it helps for you as much as it's helped for me. You know, there's a whole bunch of shooting advice at findbirdhuntingspots.com. I'll see you there. And now, thank you to Jared Deutsch for all your insights, your knowledge, and for volunteering to take on the onerous job of helping us breed and train better dogs. VHDF, the Versatile Hunting Dog Federation, is where you get more information on all of that. Thank you if you are telling somebody about the podcast. If you've left a rating or review anywhere, I sure appreciate it. And thank you to our sponsors who make it all possible. Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food, Trulock Choke Tubes, Pointer Shotguns, Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, and Cable Gangs Tie-Out Systems. Sign up for the newsletter. Just scroll down on the first page at findbirdhuntingspots.com. Lots of exclusive information there. and some fun stuff as well. Until we meet at the range or at a hunt test, thank you for listening. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation Podcast.